So there should be a page that started from last week. That should be page, I'll tell you in a second what it should be.
So what you sent today has page 1 and page 2.
What? Oh, wait 1 minute. Hold on. Today you got page 1 and page 2, correct?
Yeah.
So last time we left off in the same article in Divrei Hayomim, okay? Here, wait 1 minute.
Because last week there was a page 3.
Right. Hold on 1 second. I'll give you the page number. It'll probably be easier. Yeah. Here. Hold on. Yeah. Page Tuf Samach Dalid. I gave you today 1 and 2 is Tuf Samach Hey, Tuf Samach Vav. Okay?
Correct. Yeah.
This is Tuf Samach Dalid. We left off at the end of Tuf Samach Dalid. So just to quickly go over, 2 weeks ago, Reb Yaakov discussed the issue of why don't we allow the non-Jews to have our mishpatim. We understand why they can't have our chukim or our mitzvot, because that has to do with something that they're not obligated in. But the mishpatim they are obligated in because they're obligated so dinim, but they did and everything. So why don't they? Take our mishpatim? You can't get better ones than that. So Reb Yaakov said that our mishpatim are krucha with some of our beliefs, which they don't necessarily have. In other words, the idea of Eved Ivri goes out in the 7th year, or the land gets returned, or murders because man is created in Tzelem Elokim. These are all ideas that are more like pulchani ideas, ritual ideas. Rather, Shabbos is a ritual, right? So Shabbos, Shemitah, Yovel, where the land gets returned, where God says Ki li haaretz, right? So Reb Yaakov said that's why they really can't have our mishpatim, because our Torah is also put into the mishpatim. Then Reb Yaakov last week went 1 step further, and he explained, what is this idea that our mishpatim actually have these different ideas in them? Why don't we just have regular mishpatim? So Reb Yaakov had a whole idea about, that's exactly why the Torah was mishpatim was given in the footnote. He said mishpatim was given right after Matan Torah, because to tell us that our religion covers everything. It doesn't just cover ritual, but it covers our whole life, daily life, how we interact with another Jew or even with another non-Jew, whatever it is, right? It's just as much of a Torah when we're in the church, lo aleinu, I mean in the shul, right, as we are in the home, right? It doesn't matter, Dafkai mentioned that our home is more of a central idea than, by the conservative reform, the shul, a temple, is a very big idea, because at home you're not really keeping anything, but in shul you daven, whatever it may be, right? You have singing and daven, but by the Jews, the central part of their religion is the home, really. Shul is just part of that, but the home is really the central part. So Reb Yaakov is saying over here is that the mishpatim were there to tell us that it's not just a ritualistic religion like Christianity, which depends on which country you're on, depends on which law they follow. But we, even in America, we follow Torah law. In order to go to a secular court, you need permission from the Beis Din, right? And so much so that when the Satmar Hasidim, there's 2 Rebbes that were having a fight. Who should be the Satmar Rebbe, right? And of course, who should inherit all that property, right? So I think they might have been brothers. I don't remember. right? So they had a big fight and it went into a secular court. All of a sudden it was mutter, right? And the judge said something that was very telling, right? The judge said, "You have your own courts. Why are you coming to me?" Okay, so even the guy understands that our religion covers our courts. You know, that's an amazing thing. But this was in the newspaper that the guy threw them out of court. He says, if you can't solve it with your courts, then come back. But like this, you have your courts. Why are you coming to me? Now, obviously, the judge probably was thinking and he said, what do I need this for? Right? What the heck do I need this for? The last judge that we know, in Gush Etzion, he had rocks thrown at his windows. They tried to burn down his house. Yeah. So this judge probably felt if I paskin like one, if I give a psak din like one, not like the other, who knows what's going to happen to my home? And, on the Upper East Side or Upper West Side, wherever it might have been. Right. So, but the fact that he recognized it shows that yeah, we have our religion covers it all, basically. So that's what Reb Yaakov is saying that last week. He said that the idea is that that the Jewish people, the whole law is based on the fact that we believe that God created the world. And that's why you have in Eved Ivri the seventh year, right? And in Shemitah, you have Shemitah, then Yovel, right? God created the world, and therefore everything belongs to God. Okay, and and that's why we have these things that are connected, right? Because God wants us to know this through the mitzvos, right? That even through the mitzvah of Chaveru, He wants us to know that whenever you have din mominus, right, stuck mice or whatever it may be, I just want you to know that I created the world and your money is mine too. Mimcha kol. Based on what David HaMelech said over here in Divrei Yomim, that the Jewish people were giving belev shalom. So Reb Yaakov was explaining why are the Jews giving belev shalom? Because they know that the money is not theirs. That they got that already from Avram Avinu, he says. That Avram Avinu understood that there's a Baal Habira, there's someone who owns the world, and we're just living here. Ger v'toshav anochi imachem, right? We're gerim v'toshavim. So, God wants us to know that we don't have complete ownership on anything, on an Eved, right? It goes out after 7 years. You don't own the Eved. I own the Eved. Okay, you don't own the Eved. Therefore, you have to let him go. You don't own the land. Therefore, you have to, in Yovel, you have to let the land go back. Okay, so, and Reb Yaakov then goes on to say, that's why the Jewish people have an easier time with charity than the non-Jews. Because they have this yesod of Shabbos, of creation of the world, and therefore God owns everything. So what I'm giving away is not mine, right? It's mine to an extent that if you steal it, you're stealing from me, not from God, right? But it's not what we would call complete ownership, right? And therefore, I say that God gave me this money. I have to share it with who God obligated me to share it with. That's basically the idea that Reb Yaakov is saying. Now, Reb Yaakov is going to take this idea this week, and he's going to learn it into Giur itself, into Giur. In other words, this whole thing was that Goyim don't have this, and therefore they don't give charity like us. By the way, obviously the secular Jews of today and even of yesteryear, the secular Jews weren't aware of this idea, and they were still giving a lot of money. But to me, it's not even a question that they inherited this from their forefathers. Jews give tzedakah, right?
It's like a cultural DNA thing. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a cultural DNA thing. But Reb Yaakov is claiming that it comes from the fact that even in our mitzvos, which are pulchaniyot, which are ritual mitzvos, we have this idea that God created the world, that God owns the world and created the world, and therefore it's easier to part with money when you don't really believe it's completely yours.
Rabbi Shurin, was fascinating when Mitt Romney ran for president. So they shared with the public how much money him and his wife had given to charity. So they're very religious Mormons, and they believe in tithing, and most of the money I think they actually have to give to their church. But he gave a ton of money, but
Right.
probably not as much as a Lakewood Gvir, but he gave a lot. And then they
All right.
compared it
Okay.
to who
Good.
he was running against. I'm trying to think who he was running against. Um, he lost, right? So I guess it was Obama. It was shocking. I would be embarrassed to share that kind of a. It was like $2,000 for the year,
Who?
Obama, and Biden gave less.
Yeah, I know. I told you, I mentioned to you last week that there was a student of mine that gave $100 for Jewish charity and $100 for non-Jewish charity. And she was working in a big law firm in LA. And it wasn't like she was cheap. It was just part of her, like, well, you don't give, that's, I gave a lot of money. I gave 100 to them. I gave 100 to them, which her husband explained to her, you don't know what you're talking about. That's nothing, and she was going crazy. Her husband was giving away money like it was going out of style. And he said, I haven't even started, lo itchalti adai, right? Because he came from a family where, even though they were not religious, but they had this, like you said, they had it already in their DNA for generations and generations. And that's what you give, right? So, of course, there are definitely going to be goyim like that too. But again, per capita, I mean, if you yachasi, that's what Reb Yaakov's claim is. He doesn't talk about secular Jews here, but he talks about religious Jews versus non-Jews, right? He says there, it's like, he says there's no question if you look in the big picture, the religious Jews are giving much more. And his claim is that comes from the idea that we don't own it. Tain lo mishalo, right? Because give the Mishnah Nova is like based on these psukim here, right? To make sure that they that the people understand where it's coming from that they're giving this. So now Reb Yaakov goes into Giur a little bit over here, and this is page Tuf Samach Dalid from last week, the last piece on the page. Okay, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom on the left side. Uvenekuda hazos yibechen habolet staref la'am Yisrael. And in this particular point, so a Jew that wants to become part of Am Yisrael will be challenged, will be tested. Kedisa be Yavomis. Shacharesha Omrim Lavolit Gayer. After they say to the one that's coming, Labolit Gayer, Labolit Gayer, the one who's coming to be Mitger, Mareita Shebata Litgayer, Eata Yedeh Yisrael Bazman Hazeh Dvuyim, Dchufim, Schufim. Next page, Umeturafim, V'Yisurim Bar Malehem. This is a quote from the Gemara, right? When a guy comes, you say to him, right, why do you want to be a convert? Don't you know that the Jews, Bizman Hazeh, right, time of the Gemara, right, which the Jews were not doing well then, obviously, it was after the Roman destruction, and this is probably a brisa around that time of the Roman destruction. Devuyim means like they're mushpalim, they're sorryful, right? The chufim means they are, forced to do things. The chuf, right? They're forced to do things like the Jews throughout the Middle Ages were forced to pay a tax, were forced to go to church, whatever. Schufim, they were oppressed, and then all these adjectives. Umeturafim, they've gone crazy. The Jews from all the suffering, and suffering is coming upon them, right? So what are you guys doing over here, right? That you want to become converts, He answers, I know, and I'm not even kedai to be with you guys. So that's a very good sign. Oz mekabel so miyad, umodin so miktsas mitzvos, kalos miktsas mitzvos chamuros. I told you last week. People ask me, according to Reb Kiveger, right? You're teaching them Torah. The answer is you're not actually teaching Torah. You just let them know there's a mitzvah like this, a mitzvah like that, to see if they want to become Jewish. But you don't go into the pratim of the mitzvah. Miktsas mitzvahs kalos, easy mitzvahs, hard mitzvahs. Vadayin, this is Reb Yaakov's lashon. Vadayin modino sam also oven leket shichu peo ma'aseh sheni. And even after they agree with all these mitzvahs, kalas, uvchamuras, the Gemara says you let them know about leka, shikha, peya, meiser oni, right? The Gemara says, Gemara wonders about it. Like, what the heck is going on here? Like, why do you tell them about leka, shikha, and peya? It's a little bit strange. That of all the mitzvahs to pick that out. My time, Omer Abchia Barabba Reb Yochanan. Ben Noach nerag al pochas mishava pruta. V'lo nitan li shavon. Ben Noach is killed if he steals pochas mishava pruta. That's pretty little amount of money, okay? And he's not able to return it to the guy he stole it from, or a Jew. It doesn't matter, a guy or a Jew, right? He stole it from a guy, right? So he can't return it, which a Jew can. Pirush Rashi. Rashi explains, what does this exactly mean? Why does a guy get killed? Because for Gesel, a guy gets killed. All these 7 mitzvahs Noach. So even on Pachas Mishava Pruta, that's pretty strict. So he says, Rashi says, Makpidim al Amaman Kolkach, Gedom of Nerag al Pachas Mishava Pruta, Modino so oven. Since the Rashi explains they're makbid so much that there are money that they're even killed for pachas v'shava pruta, so we want them to know that when you become Jewish, it's a sin not to leave leket, shikha, peya, meiser oni, not to take those things off and allow the poor people to take it, right? So we're afraid that he will, in other words, not afraid, we want to see if he will go back on his wanting to be a Jew. A Jew will say, oh, no, I'm not ready for that. Shabbos, okay, kosher, okay, but I'm not ready to part with so much money. Leket, shikha, peya, meiseroni. Man, this is a ton of stuff here, right? Ayin Sham. Now, Reb Yaakov explains it. The Hainu, im yodeh sheyavo etzlo aniyim l'kot leket, shikha, peya. If he knows poor people are going to come knocking at his door, right, to get shikha, actually knocking at his field, right? So Yaakov wants to know, like, why would that make him not want to be misgayer, right? Like, what's so challenging about that? Because the attachment to his money by a guy, right, is so much his nature. Ofi shalagoy, so much his nature. The Gemara says that why does a guy get killed on Pachas Mishava Pruta? Because he's makbid on it. Because you steal anything from me, I'm going to go crazy. Asher al kein amivchan acharon. שצורך לעבור הבולס גייר אחרי שכבר קיבל הכל ולבדוק את עצמו אם יכול לעבור מהפך אופי ולהסתגל למידס הנדיבוס. We want to see at the end, can he, after he accepted all the different mitzvahs they threw in front of him, if he could check himself that he could check himself that if he can make a revolution in his nature and adapt to the midah hanedivus. L'ros ketzad nechnasim l'toch sadeo v'lopta mitvuaso she'omal v'yoga aleha, to see how people are going into his field and they are picking from his field that he worked real hard. Omal v'yoga aleha v'lismoach b'kiyam mitzvos matanos, and he's actually happy, right, that people are taking it, right? We want to know if he could convince himself of this type of thing, because it's so not. Rabbi Yaakov says the ofi of a non-Jew. What's the raya? Because the Gemara says that a guy dies even on Pachas Mishava Pruta. That means that's chashiv to him. If Pachas Mishava Pruta is chashiv, you can imagine $100, right? Okay, v'lismoch b'kiyam mitzvos matanos aniyim. K'moshe samchu b'nei Yisrael b'tnadvam lebeis hamikdash. We want to make sure that he's ready for that, right? Is he ready to be as happy as the Jewish people when they give away their money, right? Or is he going to feel like, oh man, I don't know if I could do this. I'm out of here. Because money is very, very, people are very, Reb Yaakov used the Lashon, he probably said it in Yiddish, dveikut lemamono, the attachment to money, to everybody, by the way. This is not just non-Jews. Jews are able to get over it usually more easily, right? But there's a certain idea of mammon that the Dayanim wanted to know, right? But it's interesting because I don't remember now in a Bezdin, they talk about Shabbos, Kashrus, Tarat HaMishpacha. Right? I don't remember ever them saying, you're going to have to give Meiser when you become Jewish. I mean, I never see a Bezdin asking that. This seems to be a very important aspect of the whole interview with the potential convert. Are you ready to do this? So Reb Yaakov just adds, are you ready to give it b'simcha? Because we are ready to do it b'simcha. Right? We are happy to pardon it. But Lev Shalom, remember I read you, Rashi says, Lev Shalom means you don't do it because you're embarrassed, and you don't do it even though you don't want to do it. Right? That's what it says in the Rashi. That's not Rashi. Divrei Yom, I forgot to say, there's no Rashi in Divrei Yom. It's a post Rashi. It's a fellow who filled in the gaps for Rashi because he didn't write on Divrei Yom. There's many proofs to that, by the way. I'm not telling you any big finish, right? He quotes people, that Rashi quotes people who lived after Rashi, which would be a great trick, right? If it was Rashi, right? So it's obviously not Rashi, but it's a commentary of a Rishon. I forget if they know who the Rishon is. People probably got a doctorate in the Hebrew University to find out who that fellow was, right? But whoever it is, he's definitely a Rishon. He's quoting Rishonim, and he says Belev Shalom means that they gave Belev Shalom means that, and David was very happy with it, that it wasn't because they were feeling forced, which a lot of times when we do fundraising, that's one of our tricks, is that we get somebody to call out a lot of money, so the wealthy guys in the back know they have to give more than they wanted to give because it's embarrassing, right? That's one of the tricks of the good fundraiser. The second thing is to make sure it's not a trick. The second sure is to make sure that you really are giving it Belev Shalom in the sense of you're not giving it like because you're embarrassed not to give it or because you want to look good or something. You're giving it Belev Shalom. Okay. This is 3 lines from the bottom. And this whole serious opposite view, right, between the Jews and the nations, when they are in their relationship to money, it flows from this root, from this source. Comes back to the idea that by us, the matters of money are connected with Chidush Olam. Shakol b'rshus hamachadish b'tuvay kol yom tamid ma'asav reishis. I think over there it says a machadish b'tuvay b'chol yom tamid, not kol yom tamid. No, it doesn't say b'chol yom tamid, right? Ma'asav reishis in davening, right? So, in other words, it all belongs to God. When I really feel and know that the money is not mine, what does it matter to me to give? Because the worth of money is cheap in the eyes of Bnei Avram Yitzchak Yaakov, Masha'en Kain Eitzel Bnei Noach. Kol dinei momen shelahem shenitztavu al adinim ein lem shaychus im Ribono shel Olam ve'ein zel ela bavur achvus hamedinos va'aseder olami. And Rabbi Yaakov says this is only because of, I think that's the lashon of the Mesilas Yesharim. I think it begins, no, the beginning of Mesilas Yesharim is because of achvus hamedinos to be ma'ached the different countries, and the Seder Olami. In other words, why do you have law? in order that we should be able to live in our society and societies, different countries and so on and so forth. Mimcha hakol. Without the yesod, the bechina, that level, what we call mimcha hakol. It's not the question of mimcha hakol that we know that you have everything, God. You know anything, and we have just a semi-ownership. It's not that. It's just simply in order for us to exist, we need to, the different medinot need to have laws in order to exist. Okay? So that's what he says. By the way, Rav Pam, I remember once he was giving a shmooze, and he said, people are so makbid, like to buy a very expensive esrog, to get a real hidur mitzvah of an esrog, or other hiduri mitzvah tefillin, to buy a really expensive pair of tefillin with all the hidurim, there's at least 10 other chumras you could have in your tefillin, right? And in kashrus, of course, the OU is treifed by many people because they don't have this chumrah and that chumrah and this chumrah, right? It's all a matter of chumras. It's not really, the OU is not makbid on halacha. It's a matter of chumras that, Rabbi Reuben is makbid on, 15 different chumras that the OU is not makbid on. It's all a matter of chumras. So Rav Pam says, so how come you can't be mahader in a din Torah, right? When you have to pay a certain amount of money and you don't believe you have to pay it, right? The Rav Paskins, you have to pay it. Why don't you look at it as like a hidur mitzvah, not to get angry and not to make an argument and just pay the money, right? That's also a hidur. It's a different type of it, but it's a hidur mitzvah. That the guy spends $1,000 on an esrog, and now he's obligated to pay $50 in the din Torah, and he goes nuts. That's also a hidur, right? Vasisa Yashavatov. It's also a hidur to do that. Why is only hidurim b'nom l'makom? So hidurim b'nom l'chaver too, to keep the peace between you and the fellow. Give out an extra $100. Who cares, right? So that's what Rav Pam was really trying to say over here. Rav Pam was trying to say that a Jew, by definition, has to realize that the money's not mine. And if the dayan said I have to pay it, I pay it. And that's it, right? It reminds me because we were driving, Esther was driving, and there was a parking lot, across from us. So we stopped to let a car was coming out. So we stopped to let the car go because he was already half out. And all of a sudden we got hit in the back. A very strong hit. It was so strong that the guy got out of the car. He was hit, him and his wife and 2 kids in the back. Again, he looked Haredi, but, a lot of times you look Haredi, but you're not. He looked like more modern Haredi, but he looked Haredi. And he said, my brakes didn't work. My brakes stopped working. Okay. Because, he saw that he hit us so hard. Because even if we stopped, even short, to hit us that hard would be very strange. So he hit us that, and we were stopped. It wasn't like we stopped short. We were standing there for like 3 seconds, and then we get hit, right? So my brakes didn't work. So then he pulls over to the side, and then Esther says to him, "Oh, all of a sudden your brakes work now," right? So he didn't say anything. So he said, but of course he's at fault, and he'll pay whatever it is. He hit us in the back, and then he thought it would be the 3,000 or 5,000 shekel. It would cost him, right? It turned out to cost 13,000 shekel for that little hit. Why? Because all the electronic stuff, like the computer stuff, is in the back over there. So when he smashed it in, he smashed up all the computer stuff. Now, we ourselves didn't know that. We were shocked when the guy said, they have a shammai who comes. When you have an accident, the shammai comes. So the shammai, said like the guy in the what do you call it, in the Mosach said it'd be about 8,000-9,000 shekel to fix it. So then the shammai comes in. He says, "What are you talking about? 8-9? It's 10, 12, 13,000 shekel. Take a look. You're not fixing this. You're not fixing that." And he shows him that he's missing stuff. So me and Esther were like a little bit shocked. We had to pay out the money. So and then we get it back from the insurance company or the guy, whoever it is. Anyway, So all of a sudden, the guy finds out it's 13,000, and he says it's our fault. He says it's our fault. I said, he says, we say, why is it our fault? Because you made a short stop. No, we were stopped already. We didn't make a short. We were at least 5 seconds stop. And you hit us so hard. Obviously, I said to the guy, obviously you were on your phone. Who you trying to kid? And you didn't look. And then all of a sudden you saw a car, right? So he didn't deny it, by the way, when I said you were on your phone, right? Anyway, so he said, I'm not paying you. I'm not paying you any money. So we have to sue him. Of course, basically we have to sue the guy. But here's a frum Jew, right, who said, he says, you got the wrong Shammai, you got the wrong Mosach, right? Everything, so that's a Jew that still doesn't realize that his money is not his. Okay? He's a Jew that thinks his money is his. That's the way it is. So even frum Jews are thinking that. But again, Rav Pab has a good idea because he says people are willing to give money for a lot of different things, but all of a sudden, the Din Torah, they're not willing to give any money. Okay.
Did the Rav get the money back yet?
We didn't get the money back. We have to sue the guy actually in order to get the money in a small claims court. He probably thinks we're not going to go, but we're going to go because we actually have a witness to it as well that he doesn't know about. I mean, he saw that there was a witness, but he didn't chap that the person saw everything. And the witness is a witness to say that it was his fault. He said it was my fault. So the witness heard that too, not just us. So he's
Rabbi Shurin, it's not just Piskei Din, it's also yeshiva tuition that nobody has any money for.
Oh, I hear. Anything has to do with Judaism, you mean?
Pesach vacation, yes. Yeshiva tuition, not so much.
So I heard this is a rumor, but I don't know if it's true, that someone who gets a reduction on tuition in the 18-year-old schools is not allowed to go home for Pesach.
We have that rule.
You have that rule, right? So I heard other schools also have that rule, because if you have enough money to get home for Pesach, why aren't I getting that money, right? So I don't have that problem in Vesher Rachel, because it's actually true that parents don't have any money for anything Jewish. They don't make distinctions, anything Jewish, right? So we don't have that. We have a different problem, right? But we don't have this problem. Okay. So but
Rabbi Shurin, do you have to take your driver to Beis Din before you can take him to small town?
That's a great question. I'm going to work on that one. I had the same question. Do we have to take him to Beis Din first?
But wait a second. But isn't your insurance company involved in this?
Yes.
So they're not going to let you go to Beis Din.
I had a feeling you were going to say that. Right. So again, the guy didn't even say to me, like, you can't take me to court. He didn't say it to me. So again, I want to ask some Rabbanim to see, like you're saying, that it's the insurance company, they want to handle it. If we have to take him to court, they'll handle it too,
The insurance company is covering your losses, and they will sue him.
Right, exactly. So I'm hoping that that's what's going to happen at the end. We wrote him a letter from a lawyer. I have a granddaughter who finished Hebrew University Law School. So I had to write him a letter, So, but we'll see what'll happen, right? Okay. Right. Anyway, that's but all I'm saying is that people don't realize this. They're still trying to hold on to money, even times when they're wrong. I'm not talking when they're right, but even when they're wrong.
Rev Shurin.
Yeah.
So if somebody does not have this midah of recognizing that it's not their money and they are doing this, whether it's the Rav's, combatant or many other people in many other circumstances, which I see also. So is it made that they are not Jewish? Does it what would Reb Yaakov say about if one doesn't have that midah?
That's a great question. Because we spoke about last week or 2 weeks ago about someone mentioned the different midos Jews have by shanim, right? Gomle chasadim, right? So this is also Rabbi Yaakov is certainly turning this into a very central midah of the Jewish people that they inherited from the Avos, from Avinu, right? Now, basically, like Stu said, like DNA mamash. Okay, So I'm not
But
sure
it's not in that list.
what.
It's not in, but it's not in that list of three.
That's true.
Right, it
I mean,
isn't in
Gomlei
list. That's
Chassidim
true.
is
That's true.
lav
But
dafka
I
kesef.
have a feeling what Reb Yaakov would say about it is that
That's
that
part of Gomlei Chazasi.
what?
Isn't that part of Gomlei Chasadim?
It could be it's part of Gomel Chasadim. Yeah, I thought about that too, that it's part of Gomel
That's not
Chasadim. It
usually
could
money.
be,
But
but it could
the
be
more
that
we assimilate,
we have a what? What'd you say?
I was gonna say, the more Jews assimilate, they become
Oh,
less Jewish.
that's what I would say. Even if he's from, but he's got the Goyish cup, so to speak, of, this is part of my it's part of my culture, that you have to and by the way, it was part of the culture in Eastern Europe against the Goy, because the guys take advantage of the Jews. So that's why. But that's a thing that's very hard to break. I have a student who married a guy, a doctor, a geriatric doctor. And I don't know if I told you this. So he's a very tmimistic guy. So his idea is to get someone out of rehab as soon as possible. Because as you know, for older people, rehab is a killer. If they stay there too long, they never get out. Okay, so his trick is, I mean, he's very good at this. He's a geriatric medicine, doctor, and mamish can get them out like really quick. And one guy came over to him who owns a religious guy who owns the rehab, and said to him, you don't have to get them out that fast. So he says, no, I do have to get them out because, but I'm losing money if you take him out that fast. I'm going to be losing money, right? So the guy looked at him like, I can't believe you're from. Like, it was a really from guy. And, this is a Baal Tshuva, doctor. And he said, I can't believe that you're from, right? That, he was so disappointed, He called me up. His wife called me up, and she said he's so, disappointed with the community. I said, what is it? The community? There's one guy like that. There's probably 10 guys who are not like that, But he lives in a yeshivish community, so it could happen, But I said, don't judge Judaism by Jews. Judge it by the Torah and great Jews, right? And my level of great Jews is pretty high, right? I don't think Reb Yaakov would ever have said to him, people are getting out too quick from rehab.
It's terrible, because then if they stay too long, then they push them out, because Medicare is
right at a certain point.
So it's like this sweet spot, like leave
right,
them
exactly.
so they can make money, and shove them out as soon as the money's up.
No, that's it. But if you get them out too early,
right,
so they could have still collected, there's no question about
it's
it.
about a month. Yeah.
Anyway, these are all nisyonis, but I think Reb Yaakov would say, "V'is crystal tzich." That's the what he called the Rabbi Yehuda Chassid in his Sefer Chassidim says, live in an area where the goyim are good people, because if you live in an area where the goyim are bad people, you're going to be bad, no matter how you try to isolate yourself from them. The what he called the Sefer Chassidim says you're gonna learn from them. It's impossible not to. So this is one of the things that could be is left over in the galut, from the galut when they dealt with goyim, or they're, assimilating that idea, even if they're from, so to speak, they're assimilating that idea. But anyway, that's I had to change the battery in the car, so there was the car died. So that guy Shalgrir comes and and he pumps it up, and he said, "Do you need a new battery?" So go right now to the gas station. So I went to the gas station. I didn't know we have a musach. We go to Givat Shaul. So I said, Esther, you want to go? She's too tired because we were at a Sheva Brachas Saturday night. So anyway, she was too tired. So she said, let's go over here. So as soon as I pulled in, I said, Esther, this is a great place. We're going to get a good deal. So she says, how do you know? I said, there's 10 Hasidim standing here with their cars. There's no way that they would come if they have to overpay. Absolutely no way. So that's that's the world today of bargaining and this and that. We don't have that, unfortunately, but that's it. Okay, so Reb Yosef points out something very interesting in a footnote here that's quite important. Something that you may know that Reb Yaakov Shita about this. Not everyone has the same sheet as Reb Yaakov with regard to Goyim believing in the creation of the world. Now, Reb Yaakov has a sheet. If you want, we can go into it. It's in Chumash in a few places. Rabbeinu Holech, this is 61 on the bottom. Rabbeinu Holech bazel shitaso sheben Noach tzorich la'amin b'borei olam, that a non-Jew has to believe in God. Avalo b'brias yesh ma'ayin hamuchlat, but he doesn't have to believe in that there was a creation, that yesh ma'ayin. In other words, he could believe that there's an evolution, but he believes in God. For efshar de b'brias yesh ma'ayin mushar shelo yadun, and it's even possible that he's not allowed to even be done on this issue of yesh ma'ayin. Right? He's not allowed to even go into that issue. And this was Rabbi Yaakov Shita. Why is it goy sheshavas chayiv misa? Because sheshavas means he's already connecting himself to the Brias HaOlam. Not just to God, but to the Brias HaOlam. A goy is not shaykh to that, to Brias HaOlam. That's how he gets to, because we always wondered, a goy sheshavas chayiv misa, what do we care? Like, what the heck are we getting so bent out of shape here? Right? Learning Torah, okay, we spoke about that. But he doesn't have Kedushas Yisrael. But Shabbos, okay, you can also say there's no Kedushas Yisrael there. You can take the same idea. But Reb Yaakov, what he's adding over here is that a guy is not shaykh to Shabbos, because Shabbos is shaykh to Brias HaOlam. I am Yaakov. This is where he brings all the different places. Barichas. Ukamosha akum mufka mikedushas haShabbos shel Yom HaShvi, just like a non-Jew is detached, mufka, I don't know how to say that in English, detached from Kedushas or Shabbos of the Yom HaShvi, kachu mufka min ha-shana shviyas, shnas ha-shmita, umishnas ha-yovel, ha-bola achar sheva Shabbos shanim. He's not shaykh to any of those. And therefore, in other words, Rabbi Yosef is coming back to what Rabbi Yaakov said, is that he can't have our halachas, because our halachas are connected with the Eved Ivri, he's connected with Shabbos. He's not shaykh to Shabbos. V'omer ba v'oretz lo simochel tzmisus ki liha oretz ki ger v'toshavim atem midi lo shaykh gabeha. This pasuk is not shaykh to him, ki liha oretz, because the liha oretz only comes from God creating the world, not from God being in the world. If the world was always there and there's a God, it's not necessarily his. Right? He's controlling whatever, but it's not his. But if God created the world, then it's his. Okay, v'lachein rak la'shofse b'shvi shekiblu matana tova mibeis gnazo shel makom. That's the Gemara in Shabbos. Only the ones who rest on Yom HaShvi, that they got the matana tova based from God's gnazo, from his what's the word? Gniza, from his
treasure house.
Treasure house, good, from his secret treasure. They have the feeling from you is everything. Hamashanes kol mabatam al balusam al hamomon shein legabi b'nei Noach. That's not true. Okay. V'lachein nokat rabbeinu sheminyoni hamomonos ein lebalusam al momon v'adinam atluyim ba shum kesher im abori yisparach. So he says Rabbi Yaakov is l'shitaso. What's the l'shitaso? That a guy doesn't have to believe that there's a Brias HaOlam, and therefore he's not shaykh to that idea that God owns everything, because he doesn't have to believe that God created the world, so therefore he doesn't have to believe that God owns everything. That's a very good ha'ara that he brings from Reb Yaakov. And now he says the following thing. Reb Yaakov, Bo re'eh ma ben Yisrael amim legabi pochus mishava pruta. Oh, 1 second, I didn't finish. I only got to 4 lines before it ended to 61. V'lachein im haba lizgayer lo ichlifes yityachasut shelo lemomon liyachas Yisraeli. So the one who comes to, he's finishing this off and getting to his Pshat. If one comes to be Megayer and he didn't yet change his relationship to money to that of like the Jews, Bakach Shamamin B'Shleima Shar Ribono Shalom Hu Bal HaBira Shemenu HaKol Nitan Ein Eloi L'Sgayer Dayin. So according to Reb Yaakov, it comes out very good that you ask him this question about money because that already deals with God's creation. Now that you're becoming Jewish, you have to believe God created the world. It's not enough to believe there's a God. You have to believe God created the world. So that's why we're testing you. And we're not just testing you on specific mitzvos of Leka, Chikha, Peah, and Maisarani. It's what's behind those mitzvahs. The yesod behind them is that God created the world, and therefore it's not yours. Oh, you're coming to be Megayer? That's the yesod in a Emunah that you have to have, that you didn't have to have before. According to Reb Yaakov, it works out very well. What? Yes, question.
Is Reb Yaakov saying not like the first Rashi in Chumash?
That Rashi says what?
Rabbi Yaakov, that why is it seven gracious to know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world and he can give Eretz Yisrael to whoever he wants? It's like that's Bris Olam.
God created the world and he could give it to everyone once. That's what we have to believe, right?
We don't, right? But isn't it presented there as what to answer to the goyim who say that we've stolen Eretz Yisrael? That's
a great question.
But we don't expect them to believe in Bris Olam.
Right. If we don't expect them to believe in Bris Olam, so what is the answer? You mean? Yeah. So there are people who have actually asked that question without asking your little, your vort. That, according to Reb Yaakov, they asked the question of, you think that that's going to work for the goyim? I mean, to tell them that God decided to give. So they actually say that the answer is for us to know. Right? Okay. In other words, when we're doing, we don't have to feel guilty like the Kaplanistim, that we stole their land. Right? We don't have to feel guilty. There are Jews that believe that we stole the land. You don't have to come on to Canaanites. So it could be that's what Rabbi Yaakov would say. It's really for the Jews to know that, right? If the Goyim will, say what gives you a right to the land, say God gives me a right because that's God. God owns the land, and therefore He can decide who it goes to. Right? We have to know that, but we're not going to convince the Goyim of that. That's for sure. So according to Rabbi Yaakov, you're saying there's not even an option to convince them because they don't even have to know that God owns the land. So there's no way that they'll ever know that. But it's really, I think you have to say it's really for us. That's what's going on over here. That's what I think. Okay. This is the last paragraph on the page on the left side. Right? We said that a guy, Reb Acha, Reb Chiyak, Reb Abba, Reb Yochanan, Ben Noach Neragal Pachas Mishava Pruta, right? And you can't even decide to give it back, right? There's no shy, it's not shy to give back. Keniska La'el, Ve'ilu al Yisrael Kosav Achinuch, Amru Rabbaseinu Zechor Levracha, Kama Tiyah Gzela Sheischayev Agozel Lashiva, Chazal, the Chinuch in Sefer Kuflam, Misfah Kuflamed quotes Chazal, the Gemara in Sanhedrin, how much gezel, I guess it's the laws of gezel over there. So how much gezel does a person obligated to give back? Kol gzela shava pruta. Right? The Gemara says, avol pachas mikan, afal pisha over al iser Torah, ein b'Torah's hishavon. Even though the fellow transgressed an iser of Torah by stealing less than a shava pruta, right? But he's not chayiv to give it back. Ba'arucha alav de lo sigzol. Reish Kof Tes, he writes about that what? Lefi sheYisrael b'nei Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. The Chinuch writes this because the children of Israel b'nei Avram Yitzchak nedivim b'nei nedivim hein, right? V'yadua hadav shekol shu pach v'shabruta afilu ani shebi Yisrael b'kivin shenigzal mimenu mochel oso v'ein cheftzo acharav klal. In other words, this is all the Sefer Achinuch, that since when you steal pachas mishava pruta, even a poor person, he says, right, in Israel, since it's less than a shava pruta, he's mochel, and he doesn't even want it back in any shape or form. Uva mitzvah reish chav tes midine ha-mitzvah, when in reish chav tes, which also probably has to do with gezel, right, or gneva, I don't know which one it is over there. Masha amru chazal she iser daraisa ligzol afilu kol shalom. Chazal say, right, we saw before, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says that it's also the minatorah to be gozel even less than a shava pruta. Avalav the lo sigzel einachal ela b'shava pruta. But the lav of lo sigzel only is chal, takes effect on a shava pruta. Ki atorah lo techayev ela b'davar shu mamon. Upachas mishava pruta ain't a mamon. Okay, he says pachas mishava pruta is not considered mamon. Al mikol makom asahu dvar Torah, but it's still asur. You know, the Sefer Achinuch holds this way. I don't know if everybody holds this way. Sefer Achinuch holds this way. Why? Kamo chatzi shir she'en lokar lahu is a daraisa, right? As we know, there's a concept of chatzi shir also min Torah. I think it's machlokas for Shlakish Rabbi Yochanan, if I remember correctly, right? But we paskin like Rabbi Yochanan that chatzi shir is also min Torah. So meaning you don't get malchus if you eat a half a kazayas of chazer. Yeah, but it's usher because chatzi shir also min Torah, right? That's why, by the way, that's why Reb Yaakov held, right? He came up with the idea. I think he came up with the idea that on Yom Kippur, you know, if you eat shiurim, you still did a Torah iser because chatzi shir also min Torah, but you don't have kores, right? That the idea was to get you away from kores, right? Reb Yaakov came up with the idea that if you drink something that's not roy l'shtia, like a very, he talked about tea, certain teas like, you know, herbal teas, but you put them very strong, a lot of tea bags in there, so it tastes bitter and very hard to swallow, that you're not even over on Issa Doraisa, because it's not roy l'achila. So you're not over on Issa Doraisa. Right, so Rav Elyashiv said for people who want to make sure they're not over on Issa Daraisa, they should drink that. If the doctor says you have to drink, so you drink that. It's not poison. You're not going to get a stomachache from it, but it's hard to drink. I told someone about it, and he tried it, and he said, I can't do it. He couldn't do it. I forget what kind of herbal tea he used, but he said he couldn't do it. But you doing it with a chatzi shir, like every 6 minutes, 9 minutes, whatever your rabbi told you, right? So that's already over on the Issa Daraisa of Chatzi Shir. So Reb Yaakov is quoting here the Sefer Achinuch that says, right, that the reason why you're chayiv, not chayiv, but you're over on Lo Sigzol, even if you take Pachas Mishava Pruta, it's Issa Daraisa, right? Because it's Chatzi Shir. Pachas Mishava Eina Nikra Mamon, Av Mikol Makom Asahu Dvar Torah, Kamo Chatzi Shir, Shein Lokin Alav, who is a Daraisa, Ad Kan Lashona. This is all the Sefer Achinuch. He comes up with this idea that the reason why it's usher even, that first of all, it's usher even less than a Shava Pruti over and it's a Daraisa is because it's Chatzi Shir. Chatzi Shir is also min Torah. The Hainu, Av Shein Mamon, Legabi Yisrael, Machmas the Divasam, it's not considered Mamon, and that's why Pachas Mishava Pruta, you don't have to give back, because there'll be mochel on such a small amount. Chatzi shir there is, but that has nothing to do with the fact that the Jew is mochel. He could be mochel, you know, on the thing, but by stealing, you already are over on pachas. And maybe if he's mochel, you wouldn't be over. I don't know. You know, if he's mochel on it after the fact, it sounds like you're not. It doesn't help you if you stole less than a shir. According to the chinuch, you over Issa Daraisa. Can you stop? Can the Issa be poka if he's mochel you, just like he's mochel you from giving it back, right? So he's mochel for the stealing, not just from giving it back. Mochel for the stealing itself. Would that help to get you off it? I'm not sure. He's only talking about, you know, the fact that a Jew is is not makbid on pasuk mishava pruta has nothing to do. The Sefer Chinuch, Rabbi Yaakov's explaining. Sefer Chinuch is saying it's not a steer one to the other. The Jew is not makbid on pasuk mishava pruta, and yet you transgress a Torah law, right, on pasuk mishava pruta, because it's a chatzi shir you stole. So obviously the Jew is being mochel you from paying back, but not being mochel you from stealing. That's what the Reb Yaakov seems to imply over here in the way he's learning. Any questions? Any points? Okay, we'll take it up next week, Bezrat Hashem. We'll finish this off next week. There's some very interesting stuff here.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Shurin.
much.
Thank you.
Take care. Be well.